I want to start by giving all of you, thank you Owen, a snapshot of where the Latino vote stands in this election. Those are three of the most recent polls from X, from Univision, and basically they share a very similar snapshot. The average, I would say, 55% for Harris, 37-38% for Donald Trump. This is important. Before the debate, Carlos's term, X had Biden at 46 and Trump at 41. This was before the debate. Harris has gained among Latino women and young Latinos. Also, I wanted to share this list of top issues for Latinos that I find fascinating. This is from research from your firm, Carlos, as well. But it coincides, I remember it very well, with, mostly coincides with what Sergio found in the Univision's poll last year. Gun violence as a rising concern for Latinos, rising cost of living, crime, public safety, affordable housing, healthcare. Border security comes in on the eighth spot, and a pathway to citizenship, I thought it would be interesting to place it the 13th concern for Latinos currently. And finally, support for mass deportations, Axios poll. 45% of Latinos say they support mass deportations, which is an immense number given what we're talking about. Trump is proposing to deport 15 million people. That would leave, according to some studies, 4.5 million American children orphaned, wholly orphaned or partially orphaned. Just take a second to digest that number. 42% of Latinos, of Democrats support mass deportation. So that's where we stand.
You know, there is a chunk of Latinos who are not incredibly partisan. You know, they are swinging. They don't have a part attachment. And they tend to break for Democrats, all things being equal. Because the basic snapshot of the parties is, okay, this is the party that's more welcoming to me versus the party that is not. But being open to individual Republicans in different contexts. Enter then the context of the last 2 years where Latinos felt, especially those swing Latinos, entirely beleaguered by crisis. Rising costs, well, obviously we had coming out of the pandemic, you have rising costs, you have war, you have the border moving into the cities, you have school shootings. People just felt absolutely beleaguered, and in any circumstance, people like to punish the incumbent. And so there was a distrust that President Biden was going to be the person to get us out of the crisis. His age was a factor in that. There was a sense that he could not actually be the person at the wheel getting us out of this crisis. At the same time, while there were a lot of doubts about Donald Trump, many concerns about Donald Trump, if the choice was between status quo and going back to the end of the Trump term, which for many of these swing Latinos, they said, all of these things were terrible, but I had more money in my pocket, then Trump had at least their ear. Enter Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is option C. Turn the page. I don't have to have a Sophie's choice anymore. There is somebody new and exciting. For someone who is Dem-leaning, all of a sudden you have somebody who can channel those energies.
And I think Latinos we haven't really asked that question. We usually have that item, do you care about immigration? And then Latinos have to, well, I do care, I want a reform. Whereas others might think, well, I do care about immigration, they're coming through the borders, right? And we haven't been able to separate. So lately, in parallel, say because of Latinos, we've been able to separate and really ask, so what part of that concerns you? Is it immigration, that more immigrants are coming to the country? Or is it securing the border? And I don't think, I live in El Paso, Texas, many years. And trust me, these people cross the border frequently. You go get your haircut in Juarez, right? It's 10 times cheaper. You get your groceries in Juarez. You go want the good spices, you go to Juarez, right? And so the good tortillas, and this is El Paso, right? This is the routine. This is what I did in college. Like I'll do grocery there and then come back. This is every day. And they want a more efficient system. They want more secure borders. They want to feel safe, right? And so that doesn't mean that they want harsh immigration reform, right? Or harsh immigration practices. That's completely separate.
Right after that El Paso shooting in 2019, I went to a Trump rally in New Mexico, where there were so many Latinos, Hispanics, Spanish as they call themselves. And the thing that I kept hearing again and again, I said, do you feel threatened? Do you feel worried about what happened in El Paso? No worry. And I think there are so many voters who are supporting these kinds of efforts and the things that I was talking about, who don't think Trump is talking about them. They don't feel like they are in danger. And I think sort of one of the bigger questions that we're all asking and thinking about constantly here is, what does Latino mean? And what is the identity? And is there a solidarity? By definition, these people are all US citizens. So they feel safe. And for whatever reason, for lots of different reasons, part of what I was already talking about, don't think that anything Trump will do will affect them. They don't think they will be hurt. And I think that's a little bit hard to get your mind around because for so long, many Latino leaders had imposed or tried to encourage this solidarity that doesn't seem to be quite as salient as it was 20 years ago.
If you put the politics aside, and you start to really talk about the more complex history of Latinos, right, which is the racial baggage that we carry from Latin America to this country, how all of that manifests in this country, which manifests in colorism, manifests in this anti-immigrant sentiment sometimes, manifests in this sort of proximity to whiteness. When you think about our history of colonialism, when you think about our history with political trauma, aka not just the idea of communism and the way that so many of our families went through that, but also the idea of this sort of illusion and this admiration that some people have to strongmen rule. When you put all of that and you really start to analyze it in American politics, it's messy. It's not neat. Sometimes it doesn't reflect in the polls, and so that's sort of the conversation that I think is important to have.
I don't know if campaigns really understand who Latinos are, and sometimes I wonder if I understand exactly what Latino voters are. It's such a diverse group, such a complicated group. We're through the country, across the country, in places like East LA, in Miami, in San Antonio, we are a majority. We come from different countries, from different racial backgrounds, as Paola was saying. So it's difficult to put us all together in one same group. I mean, you did see in 2020 more Latino voters voting for Trump, but still you saw more Latinos voting for the Democratic Party. And just to mention what Jenifer was saying, I was in Milwaukee, the Republican convention, and I'm sure you all remember these signs saying mass deportations now. There were some Latinos delegates on the floor, and I talked to them and I asked them what they thought about it. And number one, most of them said that it was just a campaign slogan. They didn't believe that Trump was really going to carry on mass deportations. It was impossible to do. Number two, those deportations were for mostly new immigrants and criminals or migrants that are a threat to the United States. So yeah, I don't feel Latinos are really feeling that Trump is talking about them. I agree with that point. And let's see if the strategy works this time for the Republican Party. I'm not sure any of both campaigns really have a grasp of how to get Latino voters, to be honest.
In terms of this whole question about erosion, Paola knows what I'm about to say here, is that we have to be careful not to recognize there's two ways to look at erosion. One is in share of the electorate, the other is net votes, right? And one of the reasons that we, in 2004, when Bush had his great showing with Hispanics and Latinos, Democrats had about 700,000 more votes than Republicans net across the country. In 2020, it was between 4.5 and 5.5 million, because the population has grown, and even though we're getting a slightly smaller share, we're still actually netting more net votes, which is actually all that matters, right? And so the reason why, because arguably the single biggest change in American politics since Bush in 2004 has been the bluing of the Southwest. I mean, in 2004, Bush won Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico. They controlled 5 out of the 8 Senate seats. They controlled the majority of the House seats in the Southwest. Today, Biden was the first one to win those 4 states as a Democrat since FDR, since 1940. The Republicans don't have a single Senate seat now in those 4 states, and we have a majority of the House seats there. And so that if you look back to the map of 2004, there's only 6 states that have flipped from Republican to Democrat, and it's Virginia, Georgia, and those 4 southwestern states. So the gains that we've made, even though we've lost some share, right, and we're fighting for that lost share now, is net-net. This has been, the gains that Democrats have made in Hispanics over the last 20 years has probably been the single most successful thing that's happened inside the Democratic Party.
Well, we have seen a rise in hate and division and anti-immigrant rhetoric, and I think that has led to a targeting of Latinos and Latinas and people who may be U.S. citizens, may be completely documented, but are maybe associated with the immigrants that are undocumented. And of course, we saw what happened in El Paso. We saw what happened in Uvalde in the shootings and the specific targeting of Latinos. So I think that's why you have seen this increase in concern for safety, especially gun violence, and we hear more and more about it. We saw experienced COVID, which of course impacted supply chains, inflation, cost of living, housing, homelessness, all of that has been something that my constituents have expressed concern about. But it's not just in my district, by the way, that's a very Democratic district. I've been on the ground across the country. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus has been on the road. And what we've done is we've gone into these growing Latino populated areas, and we've talked about some of the things that the Biden-Harris administration have done. Sometimes we say, well, what are you doing? What have you done? And they don't attribute maybe some benefit that they got with Congress or the administration doing it. So we continue to hear about these issues. Of course, we passed the biggest gun safety legislation in history, but it's not enough, right? As the president last night said, and as we've heard, we need to go, we still need a lot more in that space. So I'm hearing many of the things Americans are hearing. It's, what I say is Latino issues are American issues, and they're the same issues. People just want to wedge us into immigration, and as your list shows, it's not just that. So I think the events of the last several years, whether it's cost of living, whether it's gun violence, whether it's the division, has definitely had an impact on the issues.
I really believe that we have to change the conversation. So I think especially long term, I understand it's 80 days, whatever, for the election, there's certain things you have to do. But I do, and I appreciate the sort of both and approach that Carlos is taking, but I do think whenever we talk about the border crisis, the border problem, we are actually playing on their terrain. We're playing the game on their field instead of playing the game on our field. We don't care so much about the border, we care about the health and safety of the people who live on either side of that border. That's actually what we should care about and talk about. I just wrote a bunch of ads, and we tried really hard to not mention the border. We wrote 3 immigration ads, and we did not say the border. We said things like, we need real solutions. Democrats are fighting for real solutions to make a fair immigration process for all families. You can say that, it doesn't say border, crisis, problem, right? We can say things like, people move. Like, people move for the promise of freedom and opportunity, just like it's a way we can all relate with that idea. And so I believe that one of the biggest challenges we have long term is the dehumanization of immigrants. It's that idea that enables people to actually, even though that Project 2025 mass deportation policy is against their values, like it's against our community's values, they might still go for it if ultimately there's a way that they believe in the dehumanization or it has sunk in. And so I think that's our actual goal, is to get away from the dehumanization and tell a different story. Because when we do this kind of MAGA light, I'm sorry that I have to call it that, because it feels that way, that ad feels like MAGA light to me, it actually divides our coalition rather than trying to build and grow our coalition. I'm not saying it's simple, but I do think we have to start trying to tell a different story, because in the end, this idea of status threat that is core to the economic story Republicans tell, that says well, you're not doing so well, it's because of these other people over here. You know, it's these immigrants who are taking your jobs, that's why you're not doing well. It's just a divide and distract tactic. And it's to divide and distract from their actual economic policies, which are not serving all of us. And so we have to make solidarity more attractive than the lure of status threat, and I think that's what we do by telling stories that include everyone and that talk about like fair solutions, you know, a different path, that kind of thing.
I do want to mention, there are two Harris ads. The big Latino ad, which is called Determination, which ran in English and Spanish, actually is a textbook example of how to do a Latino ad. They never say Latino. It's actually great examples of things that Chair is saying and that Jen was saying. It is joyful and it is optimistic.
Yeah.
It starts with her as the daughter of immigrants. It leans into being American. And it speaks to Latinos in terms of the narrator you can tell is Latino, the imagery is Latino, there's cultural cues within it, but without pandering. And that's the thing, Latinos don't assume they're invited to the party. They want to be invited to the party. They don't want to be invited to a separate party. They want to be invited to the main party.
Yeah, they need to see themselves, but not be singled out, yeah.
Yeah, they want to be centered within the American story.
Yeah.
But also, like, they want to know they're included. So, like, the cultural cues and the narrators are very important to our getting there.
Totally.